I recently played the original Resident Evil trilogy for the first time after the remakes, and I enjoyed them overall, even though I struggled with their game design. Playing old games as someone who is used to more modern design philosophies is a rewarding but often rough experience. And next to many comments lamenting exactly that and my obvious skill issues, some of you asked me to give Code Veronica a try next, and that's what I did. Since the rumors are bubbling that this game is next in the remake pipeline, I figured I'd do it the right way around this time and play the original first. But this game seems to be the odd one out, as every recommendation comes with an appendix of caveats and the wish for a remake seems louder than for any other game in the series. What is the deal with Code Veronica? I kept asking myself that question many times before finally playing it, and honestly, it was such a different experience from what I expected it to be. But before we get into that, hi, I'm Jerry and welcome to my channel Scharfsinn, a place for game reviews, essays and the occasional analysis focused on games from a variety of different genres, new and old. I also like to write reviews over on Backlogged to share my immediate experiences with the games I play. If you're interested in any of that, I'd be glad to see you stick around. But now, let's get started. The first thing that struck me when I started playing Code Veronica was how different it looked. It was of course the first Resident Evil title that wasn't developed for the original PlayStation, and it was also the first one that abandoned the highly detailed and pre-rendered backgrounds of the original trilogy in favor of backgrounds that are rendered in real time. While they are certainly less detailed than the ones in RE2 and 3, the game's lighting system feels much more immersive. Right at the start of the game you get a lighter that shows off just how reactive this new system is, and I found it to be quite impressive for a game from 2000. So I stepped out of the prison that you start the game in and began exploring, unfortunately forgetting to take the knife with me at first. Utterly defenseless against the first few enemies I encountered, I struggled to avoid them while I got used to the controls again. After that, it very much felt like a classic RE experience, managing resources, avoiding most enemies, solving light puzzles, and all of it in intricately designed levels. I was surprised though how quickly the game opened up, with the prison area, the training facility and the palace being accessible almost immediately, plus the Ashford House and airport sections being available soon after. I think if I hadn't played the original trilogy first and gotten used to the level design, this might have overwhelmed me quite a bit. I took your criticisms to heart. I started using much more than just one save slot and went back to an older one when I made too many mistakes. It's an effective way to play these games and to avoid soft locks, but it's still tedious to replay certain sections again just to use a bit less ammo and take a few less hits. I also try to conserve as much ammo as possible by running past enemies. However, this often led to me being bitten more often and having to use more healing items. The same issue I had in the earlier games. That is absolutely on me though, and as I got further and further into the game, I became much better at avoiding enemy attacks and, more importantly, how to absolutely obliterate them with the knife. I usually like to play through games as blind as possible, only looking up solutions and tips when my patience finally snaps. With Code Veronica, I broke that rule because of how notorious its quirks and its potential for softlocks are. I knew how overpowered the knife would be against most enemies, I knew about the infamous tyrant fight on the plane and effective ways to deal with him, I knew about the shared item boxes and the exact times when you switch between characters. Basically, I spoiled the whole game for myself, and while this certainly made for a smoother experience overall, I hate that I felt the need to do that. If I hadn't looked those things up, I'm certain that I would have had an awful time with this game. However, I didn't look up everything, and the game is still full of such things that you can't possibly predict. It doesn't just apply to major features such as the character switching and shared item boxes. For example, I didn't know that bringing back some medicine to the guard at the start would take away the lighter and irreversibly replace it with a lockpick. The lighter is the tool to use against bats, so imagine how much fun I had not being able to use it when I reached the house Ashford that was swarming with them. Speaking of House Ashford, however, I do think apart from being supremely frustrating gameplay-wise, it is Code Veronica at its aesthetic peak. While previous areas are very bare bones, this one has such moody lighting and every room is filled with distinct and different detail. The contrast is jarring, frankly, and I'm not sure if it works. I had some moments of extreme frustration in the first half of the game, particularly on the second trip to the Ashford house, but overall it was a good and classic RE experience through and through, and much more so than I expected going in. And while I needed a few tries to beat the tyrant on the plane, I thankfully managed to avoid getting stuck and continued on to the Antarctic base. Visually, this place is bland, as its rooms are even more barren than the ones on the island, somehow. But the level design is just as solid as before, even with that annoying bug-infested hallway next to the save room. In one of the game's most atmospheric moments, a chained creature underneath the base breaks free and confronts you just as you make your escape from the base. Seeing this creature, called Nosferatu, stepping out of a snowy fog is genuinely unsettling, and reading about its backstory makes it even more haunting. The boss fight against it is okay, but at least it's not infuriating, unlike another boss I'll get to later.
No!
After this fight and a failed escape, you switch over to Chris Redfield. What follows is essentially a B scenario similar to RE2, except it's mandatory. As Chris, you find yourself on the same island as Claire did at the start, except much later, and many parts of the same levels are altered or shut off. This part certainly drags, as the way back to the save room becomes obnoxious, fighting the hunters that Wesker sends after you can be a pain, and there is almost no progression in the story. Still, it's mostly well designed and reuses the same environments in a way that feels fresh. After making your way out, you also run through the Antarctic base as Chris. One part that stood out to me early on here was this large room where you previously could only walk around the gallery and down in the room below. Now though, the room has completely flooded and frozen over, allowing you to walk over it and reach new areas while a giant spider swims in the ice below. It's subtle, but such effective horror. What follows afterwards though is a lot of backtracking through rather uninteresting environments, and it starts to drag, even with a short Claire section to break it up. Speaking of which, this part is strange. It's extremely short, only consists of a weird puzzle with a crystal ball that you have to smash, and then a section where you run away from a mutated Steve whose axe swings are almost impossible to avoid. Story-wise, it fits in this part of the game, yet the design of this level is so odd and doesn't feel like it was playtested enough. Back as Chris though, you go through a few rooms that are eerily reminiscent of the Spencer Mansion from RE1, and then find yourself in one of the game's best boss fights against Alexia. Not that there's a lot of competition. Before the fight starts, there is an epic over-the-top cutscene where Wesker tries to fight against her that is just plain cool. The mechanics of fighting her are as simple as they are with every early Resident Evil boss, and at this point in the game I was so stacked with shotgun ammo that defeating her took no time at all. Yet the environment of the mansion, orchestral music and a confident Alexia striding towards you, surrounded by fire, is so memorable on an audiovisual level and makes this fight stand out nonetheless. What's left is a section with the most tedious and unnecessary distance between an item box and save room, a bit too much backtracking, and then finally the game's climax. After unlocking the security locks with the literal code Veronica, you fight the game's final and absolutely worst boss. It's Alexia again, but in an even more mutated form. This fight is awful in every way. Not only is it framed in a way where you can't even see all of her, she also throws so many attacks and smaller enemies at you in such quick succession that it's almost impossible not to get stun locked. Once you finally manage to take her down, you get to an equally annoying second phase where she flies around in the air and you have to take her down in first person with a rocket launcher with horrible controls. But once you finally hit her, it's over. Oh well, almost over, because what follows is a confrontation with Wesker, who beats the absolute life out of Chris. This is only a cutscene though, unfortunately, something that a potential remake could address with a fight akin to the one against Krauser and the RE4 remake. Speaking of cutscenes, I've omitted the story and characters so far to focus on the gameplay experience, but I need to talk about those aspects now, because if any part of this game could truly benefit from being remade, it is absolutely the narrative.
I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her.
This may sound like a blasphemy, but I don't think any of the original 3 Resident Evil games have good stories. Or rather, stories that are good on paper but often fall flat in the actual dialogue and acting, at least for me. RE1 is entertaining for its utter silliness, and RE2 certainly has some decent character moments with Leon and Ada, as well as an effective monster in Chief Irons. And both games have, in theory, compelling mysteries. RE3 though has almost nothing noteworthy to speak of in my mind, apart from some iconic lines, and I know that's a hot take, but I stand by it. Code Veronica's story is not good either, at all. Characters like Steve, Alfred and Alexia are utter caricatures with some of the worst voice acting I've heard in a long while. Even compared to RE1, it's often more grating than anything else. Steve especially is such a creepy character, trying to kiss Claire while she's asleep and failing to do a task because he stared at her too much. And the game tries to frame it as romantic with the most unbearably sappy music. Albert Wesker isn't written any better either, although his character design and badass moves elevate him above the rest. As for Claire and Chris, they can hardly even be called characters, honestly. These protagonists have that 1,000-yard stare and 2 personality traits at most. And I don't know which is worse, caricatures or personality voids. The Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes breathed life into their characters and made them speak and react like actual human beings. Even in the RE3 remake, every character is so much fiercer and their personalities believably clash with each other, and I will die on this hill. I cannot understate how much Code Veronica could benefit from the same treatment, by reining in the silliness of Alfred Stephen Wesker while injecting more quirks into Claire and Chris akin to their more recent appearances. In fact, Steve could benefit from this most of all. His story is incredibly tragic. Both of his parents have been turned into zombies because they went behind Umbrella's back, and he himself has been imprisoned on the Ashford's Island. In the end, he gets infected with a virus and almost kills Claire, but manages to stop himself at the last second before he dies. With the sensibility Capcom has shown in their recent games, this could be such a powerful tragedy. It could also give Claire some much needed character growth. There are so many opportunities. As for Steve's creepiness, I don't think it's inherently a problem, but please Capcom, don't try to make it look romantic, okay? Resident Evil stories have never been and still aren't groundbreaking, but the remakes, Resident Evil 7 and Requiem, hit emotional beats for me that the original trilogy never did. There is so much potential for a gut punch of a story in Code Veronica with Steve and the Ashford twins that the original game never reached, in my opinion, and I would love to see it fulfilled. In the process, Code Veronica will surely lose some of its silliness, just like RE1 and 4 did in their reimagined versions. But just like in RE1's case, I think it will be for the better ultimately. Who knows though, maybe I'll change my tune about this once I get to the original Resident Evil 4. But that was it. I beat Code Veronica after about 16 hours. With all the tips and solutions to guide my way, I had a mostly engaging time with the game, even if certain sections felt too bare bones, dragged on for too long, or were just straight up frustrating. If I had played this without any help, it would have been a nightmare, I'm sure of it, and I wish it wasn't like that. At its core, however, this is a game very much like the original trilogy, which I didn't expect considering how different the conversation is around this game. That similarity is also to the game's detriment, however, as it doesn't evolve the formula in any meaningful way. It is ultimately just another one, harsh as that may sound. I'm glad I experienced the original first this time, but I also found myself wondering constantly how a remake could change this game for the better. My biggest hope is that a Code Veronica remake would be an experience that you can enjoy on a first run without having to consult so many guides or risk possible softlocks. An experience that warns you in time of its points of no return, that eliminates select points of friction that add nothing to the experience but frustration, and most of all, harnesses the emotional power that the original story failed to convey. Code Veronica is still worth playing in its original form, even with its many pain points and a potential remake on the way. If it's indeed real, aspects of the original will inevitably be lost in translation. Quirks that fans of the original see as essential characteristics, not as rough edges to be smoothed over. That's the reality of remakes, and I fully understand why some fans recoil at this. If the remake brings the narrative more in line with recent titles and refines the level and boss design though, it could honestly become one of my favorite games in this series. But that's all I have to say for now on my experience with Resident Evil Code Veronica. I'm eager to know what you think about this game now. Do you think it's perfect as it is, and still worth playing despite the rumors about a remake? Let me know all about it down in the comments below, and I'll see you again in the next video. Take care.